Ignore the Dementor, a Harry Potter fan fiction written by NinjaPandaScholar. Chapter 10. End of Term Snacks. Harry was extremely happy, peaceful and warm for the first time in a long time as he flew high above the Quidditch stands and feasted on the excitement rolling off of the student's body during the Gryffindor versus Slytherin Quidditch game. His positive feelings were laced with an underlying feeling of guilt at feeding from his fellow students, but he was careful not to do anything to actually affect the students in any way, so he justified it to himself. The Gryffindor and Slytherin teams zoomed around below him while Harry kept one eye on the snitch. The advantage of being obsessed with shiny things apparently translated to him not being able to miss the golden ball wherever it was. However, it wouldn't do to end the game too early and miss his wonderful feast. It was obvious to him now why the Dementors in his third year couldn't avoid crashing the Quidditch game. It was just so delicious. "Potter, whatever you're doing, stop it!" Malfoy growled as he came up level to where Harry was hovering. "My broom is starting to develop ice crystals." "Then fly lower." Harry grinned at the other seeker, but did rein in his aura slightly. "If you didn't follow me so closely, you wouldn't even notice." "No using creature powers in Quidditch!" The blonde almost huffed in annoyance. "How do you like it if I started messing with you? You're supposed to be inconspicuous, you idiot!" "First of all, I'm too far up for anyone that isn't sitting right on my arse to notice. Secondly, considering I have no idea what you are, maybe I'd like that. I don't know." The Gryffindor smirked teasingly. It felt more like remedial potions as they flew above everyone else and were alone. It was easy to forget this was Malfoy and not Draco, who was still a prat, but at least a reasonable one behind closed doors. "Neville seems to think you aren't terrible anyway." Malfoy growled in frustration before Harry was hit with the most delicious wave of pure dessert, like chocolate chip biscuits and treacle tart. "Wow!" The Dementor grinned dazedly. "That was awesome. Do it again." Draco gave a shout of indignation. "Idiot! Gryffindor! You can't even respond right! What are you?" That'd be telling, Draco." Harry laughed, really wondering again what the Slytherin was and how he could convince him to do whatever he'd just done more often. "I'm full now, though, so I think it might be time to end the game. Toodles!" He teased as he chased off after the snitch he'd never lost sight of, with Draco fast on his tail. It was the last weekend of the term, and in the middle of all the exams were all the last meetings of the HSMC and the DA before the holidays. Since he learned the truth, Dumbledore had been keeping an exceptionally close eye on Harry, so that the Dementor clearly noticed and smiled broadly at the headmaster whenever he randomly appeared, trying to non-verbally assure him that he wasn't going to go off and suck the soul from everyone in the castle. He wasn't sure if he was annoyed at the man or understood him. He was a pretty dangerous creature, in all honesty. The headmaster always just smiled back and twinkled his blue eyes reassuringly, but Harry knew he was worried. The Dementor wasn't sure if he was worried about Harry or about the other students, though. Really, it wasn't Harry. It wasn't Harry the man should be worried about. It was the army of house elves. The house elves had presented a list to the teen at the end of November with the names of all the students who were either slobs, disrespectful, annoying, or generally pains in their arses. They requested he give them a bad day occasionally. Who knew the happy creatures were actually pretty vindictive? He assured them that he'd start on their list in the new year. As much as it sounded fairly unethical, he was certain Hermione would approve as a victory for Spew, as at the very least. When he asked Luna, she just shrugged and added a few of the Ravenclaw girls to the list at the bottom. So, all in all, it sounded like he would eat well in the new year at the very least. It was in high spirits looking forward to going to Grimmauld and getting out from under the worried gaze of the headmaster that Harry stepped into remedial potions. "Happy Christmas!" Neville called out from where he had an arm around the disgruntled-looking Draco who still glared at Harry every chance he got about the last Quidditch game. "Happy almost Christmas, Neville!" Harry smiled back and took in the room. Most people were milling around and chatting like normal, but there was a large dragon-like creature in the corner that was completely black and had scaly wings wrapped around him with large yellow eye, just peeking out from under the scaly wing. "What's going on there?" Harry asked, wondering which student it was. Graham is still sulking about the match," Luna answered and gave her friend a tight hug. "He's being a child," Hestia, the Ravenclaw 6th year, accused the 7th year with a glare. Montague, the gargoyle, just huffed and laid a wing over her sharp, pointed ears on either side of his head. "It really was a great catch, Harry." Eyre smiled at him with a laugh towards the sulky gargoyle. "Ginny and Michael broke up!" Colin exclaimed as he and Dennis ran into the room. Everyone groaned, even Harry, who had gotten used to Colin's regular updates on his hopeful mate. Matthew very dramatically sighed and banged his head on the table he was sitting at with Brooke and David. Brooke patted him on the head. "Don't worry, you'll be fine," she assured him. "What's the countdown now?" Aurelius the half-werewolf asked as he laid down a card nonchalantly in his game of Exploding Snap with Alice, Aurora and Cara. One week and 6 days," Draco answered for Matthew, "right before he gets back to Hogwarts, though I doubt he'll find his mate before returning." "She's not going to like me," Matthew groaned into the table. Everyone was completely ignoring Colin at this point, who was still vibrating with excitement from the door. Snape billowed into the room at that moment in a dark cloud of an imposing aura and physically moved the Creevy brothers out of his way. "Colin, sit down and plan how to ask her out after the holidays. Matthew, your mate will like you. You're a Vila, it's almost guaranteed. Graham, stop sulking and turn back. And everyone, eat the snacks so I can leave and start my teenager-free holiday." He sneered at the room before claiming his normal armchair. A huge spread appeared on the long table in the front of the classroom, courtesy of the house elves. Deciding to hang back and observe what people took to help him guess what species they might be, Harry stood in a corner. Draco rushed over to a beautiful platter of sushi that the house elves must have spared no expense in making. "Ah, no!" Brooke immediately swatted his hand away, causing the blonde to glare at her. "Naiads get the first run at the seafood," she smirked as Draco rolled his eyes and made a dramatic bow gesture to the platter. "I'll try to leave you a few pieces." Harry nodded. So Brooke was a naiad, and she was dating David, a Druze or a Dryad. If he remembered correctly, the species were actually fairly similar. One was just connected to the land and one to the water. He wondered at Snape's comment from the first meeting that their species were not supposed to like each other. That sounded like a soap opera if he'd ever heard of one. He made a mental note to sit with them and talk later. Most of the other food was fairly normal, with biscuits, cakes, finger sandwiches and crisps. There was a large bowl of what looked like crickets and earthworms. To the side, though, he watched Hestia scoop some up on her plate, besides a piece of cake, as well as Luna, who put some on a piece of bread. He wrinkled his nose at that, but assumed it probably wasn't any stranger than him eating people's emotions. The normal pitcher of blood was visited by Snape, of course, as well as the third-year Ravenclaw Bartholomew. Harry marked him as a maybe vampire in his head. That was all he was able to get from the food before Luna pulled him over to sit with Neville, Draco, David, and Brooke. He pushed a plate of cake and biscuits into his hands. "Treat Jamie a bit," she quietly ordered him, as he just shook his head and laughed. "What are y'all doing for the holidays?" Luna asked the group as she bit into her cricket sandwich with a crunch. "Normal Christmas with my gran and visit my parents at St. Mungo's," Neville said. Harry almost choked on a piece of biscuit as Draco put an arm around Neville comfortably. At his last statement, he had a vague idea of what happened to Neville's parents from the comments made by Mad-Eye Moody, but he knew better than to ask for more details. "I'll be staying in my room and trying to avoid any visitors we might have at the manor," Draco drawled with a disgusted wrinkle of his nose. Harry tilted his head and observed the Slytherin better. "I thought you would be excited to see any visitors that may come to your manor from what you've said in the past," he asked mildly with a raise of an eyebrow. "Harry," the blonde sighed, and Neville gave his hand a bit of a squeeze. "I do what I must. I am not a creature with any helpful or offensive skills, unlike Graham and a few others here. Neither of my parents inherited a creature trait, and they both think me weak, which I admit I probably am. If I do what they ask of me, they won't tell our visitors what I am, and that's the most I can ask from a life at this time. So don't judge what you don't understand." Harry nodded slowly. After talking with Graham earlier in the term, he realized there was more going on in the creatures' lives in this club than he would ever have imagined. Secrecy and survival seemed to be the driving factor behind everything they did outside of this one classroom. It was no way to live, in his opinion, but as he'd only been a magical creature for a little over 4 months, he figured he had no room to speak. I'll be spending the holidays with my godfather," he said slowly, looking at Draco meaningfully. "I'm sure that he could help me locate a certain pureblood manor if there was a reason someone might need help." Draco sneered at him. "I don't need your help, Potter, and I never will." Luna shook her head, reddish earrings bouncing. "You should take your own advice, Draco. Don't judge things you don't understand," she warned. "You mentioned there were some creatures in this room that have more offensive capabilities. Maybe don't turn down one that does out of hand." The group All looked at Harry contemplatively. Those skills would be? Draco crossed his arms, letting go of Neville. Harry shrugged. Look, I don't want anyone to know unless it's the only way. But you sent for me and I might have some options for help. Irritate him enough and he may let it slip, Snape commented dryly from the corner of where they had no idea he'd been listening. The man never did look up from the potions journal he was reading. After learning what Harry was, the man seemed to completely ignore him. Harry was okay with that response. It had actually made potions class significantly easier. Luna violently smacked Harry's shoulder. Oi! What was that for? Harry rubbed the spot. You didn't tell me Severus figured it out! She accused him. Harry, you can't say things like that in front of people like Severus. Brooke hissed lowly at the Dementor from beside Draco. You'll get Draco in trouble, no matter political views. This club is theoretically safe, but it's still better not to chance it, especially with where Draco is going for the holidays. Draco just shrugged. He's my godfather. He swore on his magic to protect me, so I think I'm mildly safe anyway. Harry kept his emotions tightly out of his expression when it seemed that Draco didn't even know what side of the war his godfather was on, though it did really make sense from all their classroom interactions that Snape was Draco's godfather, now that he knew. What are you two doing over the break? He turned the conversation away from politics to the soap opera he was excited to hear about. We're introducing our families, David answered with a look of pure terror on his face. That's wonderful, Luna said dreamily off into the distance. Not really. David grimaced. My family can't visit Brooks since they live underwater, and Brooks' family don't like the idea of walking in the middle of Dryad territory. They've been arguing back and forth through Owl Post, the Naiad side. Unfortunately, the letters have all been coming to the two of us, and we have to keep passing the message along. It's like being back in primary school. Meet somewhere neutral, Draco suggested. A nice seafood restaurant by the water. That way the Naiads can eat fish, and most restaurants have vegetarian options for the Dryad. If they can't get along, both parties have the option to leave early as well. That would work! David smiled and reached over to squeeze his girlfriend's hands. Thanks, Draco! Why don't your species get along anyway? Harry finally asked as he tried to force down another tasteless biscuit. Too similar, Brooke suggested with a shrug. There've been so many political issues. The biggest was the amphibian debate of 1784. You know, since they live on both land and in the water. A lot more have stemmed from that, though. It's all very ridiculous. Isn't all politics? Neville chuckled. Don't you have a seat in the Wizengamot? David raised an eyebrow at the high elf. Neville rolled his eyes. Inherited. It doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. A voice for a creature. Rights is never a thing to take lightly. Graham joined them, finally back in his human form. Well, I still have over 2 years before I can take it up. Neville nodded contemplatively. My Gran is in the seat now, as a high elf herself. I would hope she's already one of those voices. Anyone up for a game of Cluedo? Colin asked as he and Dennis came over with the Muggle board game. The group almost sighed in relief to be distracted from their heavy political talk. set it up and tell me what you've come up with to ask the Weaslette out. Draco motioned to the table and pinned the druid with a stern glare. I don't trust your plans to be non-stalkerish. Harry nodded in agreement, knowing Colin and Danny's stalkerish habits well himself. He kept his big Dementor mouth shut, though, and just reapplied lip balm, now that he'd finished the horrible human food. The last DA meeting of the term was spent practicing stunning spells and shielding spells before Dobby and Winky popped in with more snacks, and the end of the club dissolved into a low-key party. Harry's Dementor senses itched every time they met in the common go-room. During the party, when he was less busy than normal teaching, he could concentrate on the feeling more. He was certain there was something somewhere in the room that was like what his locket used to be. Another non-human soul container. A soul that he could, maybe, ethically take and eat. The DA members finally started leaving in groups of 2 or 3 to not be noticed by Umbridge, hopefully. Harry decided to hang back. It was his last chance of the term to find out what it was and what was calling to him. Giving Luna a meaningful look, he leaned against one of the practice dummies and waited for the room to clear. Cho Chang seemed to be hanging back too for some strange reason or another, but after an intense glare from Luna that even Snape didn't seem to be immune to, the older Ravenclaw slunk out of the room with the last group. "What do you think she wanted?" Harry asked the fairy. Luna gave him a vague smile and walked over to where he was standing. "You sensed something? I've seen you look like there was something important around every time we've met in here. I feel something too, but I don't know what it is." Harry pulled his locket out from his shirt. There was a piece of soul in this when I first found it. There's something that feels like it here in this room somewhere. Is that something common in the magical community? Is it bad that I ate a piece of soul in here? It didn't feel recent, you know. Harry trailed off, wondering what he was actually asking. Luna studied the locket. "I've never heard of that before, but it would have to be very dark magic with ill intent to split a pure thing like a soul. Even Dementors don't split souls. It would not be a good or virtuous thing for someone to do." Harry grinned at her, getting the answer he'd been hoping for. "So it's not bad if I eat it then, right?" She shrugged with a chuckle. "I'm not your conscience. I wouldn't judge you, though. How do you purpose to find it in here?" The Dementor had put a lot of thought into that throughout the party. "I don't think it's actually in this room. I think I could ask for it and it might appear, though. I think that's how the magic works in here anyway." "Can you get rid of it safely?" Luna asked, looking at the diadem in repulsion. Harry rolled his eyes in answer, but then paused and looked to the door. Luna, I'm going to have to leave Jamie to do this. Maybe you want to." He motions towards the door. Luna put her hands on her hips and sent her patented glare at him. "Harry James Potter, what makes you think I'd think any less of you if I saw you in your true form?" "And saw me eat a soul?" He raised an eyebrow questioningly. "You saw me eat crickets 2 days ago." She shrugged. "I don't see an issue here. Why do you?" Harry smiled brilliantly at his friend.
I'm going to marry this girl,
came unbidden as a thought that flew through his mind. He shook his head, not knowing where that came from, but knowing he'd have to actually analyze it at some point. Based on what Sirius had told him of his dad and mom, and how they got together, he thought it might be some sort of genetic thing.
Oh, okay, look out for Jamie then,
he said as he lay on the floor, since there weren't any chairs around except for the beanbags that probably wouldn't hold the body without him in it. Harry rose out of the body and floated towards the maybe diadem. By the time he turned back to look at Luna, she had already sat on the floor and had Jamie's head in her lap. He smiled at her, even though she couldn't see under his hood. "You look gorgeous, dear," she grinned up at him playfully. Harry chuckled his hauntingly echoing chuckle and turned to the soul. He held out for a moment, savoring the feeling when he picked up the soul container and happily absorbed the soul. It was the same spicy chocolate taste of the one in the locket. It warmed his insides like the best hot chocolate he'd ever had. "Ah, that's much better," Luna exclaimed from where she was combing Jamie's hair with her fingers. "All that nastiness is gone. It was giving me a headache." He hovered back to his body and set the diadem on the floor before picking the body up again.
Hey,
it tastes good?" Luna smiled as the eyes of the body lit up again.
"So good."
Harry smiled up at her, loving the feeling of her fingers in his hair.
"You sure you aren't freaked out?"
Luna glared at him and gave his hair a sharp tug. "Don't you think bad things about my friends? Why, when those friends are yourself?" Laughing, he stood up and picked up the diadem to inspect it with his human eyes.
"It's beautiful,"
he breathed out in awe, taking in the sparkling jewels that caught the light from the torches just right. "It is quite pretty," Luna agreed, looking at it over his shoulder. Harry stared at the brilliantly shining diadem, lost in the shine from the stones, and raised it to his head automatically. "Oh, hell no!" Luna exclaimed before taking the diadem from his hand. She quickly transfigured the priceless artifact into a bracelet and slipped it onto Harry's wrist, smirking at him the whole time. "It's still not very manly, but at least it isn't a crown. I may be eccentric, but even I don't want to walk around with you wearing that thing on your head."
"Plus, I can see it better now."
He grinned at her before his smile fell.
"I really can't help it. You know, shiny things just call to me."
"Harry, it's fine." Luna smiled and wrapped her arms around him. "We all have something like that. Mine is colors. I absolutely love the brightest colors possible. And Neville has plants. He treats them like people."
"And whatever his obsession with Malfoy is."
Harry chuckled, feeling much better that he wasn't alone in this. "Definitely," she laughed and pulled him towards the door. "So you just enjoy your new, shiny bracelet and don't worry about what anyone else says."
"As long as I don't wear it on my head."
Dementor choked as his friend rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, if you insisted on wearing it on your head, you know I'd be the first to stick up for you, but I know you wouldn't want that picture in the Daily Prophet, am I right?" Luna remarked wryly as they exited the room of requirement. Harry winced, thinking of how that'd go.
"Yeah, Ron would never let me live that down."
It was a flurry of activity as everyone threw last-minute items into their trunks and headed out of the dorms for Christmas. This year, Harry, Hermione, and all the Weasleys were leaving the castle for the first time ever. Snape was probably beside himself in glee. If anyone could tell Harry had received a note at breakfast when Hedwig flew to the table from Dumbledore and explaining that Harry would be leaving the castle through the flue in his office instead of the train. The headmaster explained that no matter how indestructible Harry was currently, it was probably the best he didn't draw any unwanted attention to the train, and the older man was certain Voldemort was planning something.
"What's with the new accessory?"
Ron asked between bites as he hurried to finish their breakfast and grabbed their things. Harry glanced down at his new bracelet with a smile.
"Luna got it for me,"
he said, sort of telling the truth. "Well, that was very nice of her," Hermione said, also looking questioningly at the bracelet. "Are those stones real? They look real." Harry shrugged.
"We found it in the come and go room, so no telling. It's probably really old, though. I hate to tell you, but that looks like a chick bracelet, mate."
Ron snickered over his teacup. Harry glared at him and took the last bite of his eggs before leaving the table in a huff. He didn't even know why he was mad, but leaving seemed like a better idea than yelling when he wasn't even sure why he was angry. "Harry, wait up!" Hermione called as she caught up to him on the stairs. "It's really nice Luna got you the bracelet. Don't listen to Ron."
"Thanks, Hermione."
Harry smiled at her, his mood lifting.
"Have a good Christmas, okay?"
"You too. Stay safe and don't let Snuffles do anything dangerous."
Harry shrugged. "You know, Snuffles. I'll do my best. I think Remus is staying with us too, so he'll help."
Hermione seemed to breathe a sigh of relief at that. She must really not trust Sirius as an adult figure. Harry concluded with a mental shrug. It wasn't wrong, he guessed. "Great. See you in the new year, then," she smiled as they got into the tower to grab their things and separate to go to the headmaster's office and the train. New update on the HSMC characters and what Harry and we currently know they are. Severus Snape and the sponsor, Slytherin head of house, is a vampire. Graham Montague is a 7th year Slytherin and a gargoyle. Matthew Bastien, 7th year Hufflepuff, a Vila. Hestia Talon, 6th year Ravenclaw, unknown. Brooke Bay, 6th year Hufflepuff, Naiad. David Birch, 6th year Hufflepuff, Druze or Dryad. Harry Potter, 5th year Gryffindor, a Dementor. Neville Longbottom, a 5th year Gryffindor, a High Elf. Draco Malfoy, a 5th year Slytherin, unknown. Luna Lovegood, 4th year Ravenclaw, fairy. Colin Creevy, 4th year Gryffindor, a druid. Cara Brynhilder, 4th year Slytherin, unknown. Aurora Jones, 3rd year Hufflepuff, half werewolf. Aurelius Jones, 3rd year Ravenclaw, half werewolf. Bartholomew Beadle, 3rd year Ravenclaw, vampire. Dennis Creevy, 2nd year Gryffindor, druid. Hergia, 2nd year Gryffindor, unknown. And Aseline Hessop, 1st year Slytherin, a Vila. Chapter 11 Misconceptions and Miscommunications. Harry was immediately grabbed into a bear hug when he stumbled out of the flue into Grimmauld Place.
Good to see you too, Siri.
Harry laughed as he patted the back of the animagus holding on to him for dear life.
Harry, I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have so much fun.
Sirius beamed before pulling him out of the kitchen and towards the sitting room.
Harry, good to see you.
Remus glanced up and smiled from where he had been reading a book when the two joined him.
You too,
Remus. Harry smiled, catching himself. Sirius was almost vibrating in his excitement.
I have so many plans. After the order meeting tonight, we're free until Christmas. We're going to decorate and sneak out to go shopping. And I'm going to teach you a crap ton of spells for your defense club thing. And it's going to be epic.
You're not sneaking out, Padfoot. Remus sighed and turned a page in the book he was reading. Apparently this was an old argument.
Of course not!
The fugitive winked at Harry where the other man couldn't see him. Harry shook his head and just smiled. He knew he'd be helping his godfather sneak out. He didn't see a way around that one. He didn't know how to help his godfather, not being a mind healer, but he'd at least keep him safe when he was being reckless. Plus, you aren't free. Severus will be in and out, brewing potions in the attic for the order, and everyone is coming over for Boxing Day, and you really should clean since Creature has disappeared again. Remus continued, not noticing the silent conversation on the other side of the room.
Snivelous!
Sirius grumbled, but seemed to brush it all off.
How's class? Going with the jit, by the way.
Harry shrugged. He glanced nervously over to Remus, deciding to go out on a limb and take a chance on the man who had only ever been nice to him.
I got roped into remedial potions, he said, looking pointedly at the werewolf. He's much more chill outside of class, and it's been helping some.
As much as Harry studies his face, Remus gave absolutely no indication he knew Harry was talking about the HSMC. The society was the only remedial classes offered, though. Sirius snorted and went to rant about Snape and potions in general. The werewolf just shook his head and smiled at Harry.
I'm glad you're taking your studies seriously. Maybe it'll help you get an OWL on the subject, he said kindly.
Yeah. Harry was so confused. How did Remus not know what he was talking about? Maybe he just didn't want to say anything with Sirius in the room? It seemed strange he didn't give no indication at all he knew what Harry was talking about, though.
Oh hey, look at this!
Sirius grabbed a large leather-bound journal from an old desk in the corner and plopped it down in front of Harry.
It's my notes for your group you're teaching.
It
started out on napkins, but it kind of grew from there. Hey, you should plan to teach them all the Patronus charm, right? It's that useful against dark creatures, and you can also send messages with them.
Yours is quite impressive, Remus added with a smile. You should definitely teach it. Harry looked at the two of them, feeling overwhelmed, and slowly shook his head, knowing he'd never be able to cast a Patronus charm again, or be in the room when it was being cast.
Everybody's at different levels. I don't think it'd be easy to get them all to learn a high-level charm like that. I think we should stick to more standard defenses.
Nonsense! Sirius waved a hand.
You got this. Plus, with all my ideas, you'll have plenty of lessons until the end of next year.
Harry flipped through the book with all kinds of defensive and offensive spells and drills in it. Sirius obviously had a lot of time on his hands.
This is amazing, Padfoot. Thank you.
A loud crash resounded before Sirius' mother's portrait started screaming. Remus rushed out of the room to shut it up.
Don't worry, Harry. We're going to have a great time this Christmas.
Sirius gave Harry's shoulder a quick squeeze.
We just have to ditch the spoil sport in order to leave the house.
The older man wolfishly grinned at him.
I'm here for the show!
Tonks announced as she followed Remus in, her hair a brilliant shade of purple.
You're not here to help?
Sirius asked with a pout as he threw a pillow at his cousin. Merlin, I can't boil water! My ordering takeaway skills are unmatched, though. Tonks caught the pillow out of thin air and lobbed it back.
What's going on?
Harry chuckled at the two of them in confusion. Remus just grinned and plopped down beside Harry on the couch.
Your godfather thought it would be a good idea to kick Molly Weasley out and swear he'd cook for the ordered meeting tonight, even though I doubt he's ever cooked in his life.
Well, it can't be that hard! Sirius rolled his eyes. And that's why I'm here hours early! Tonks ruffled Harry's hair with an evil grin. The fallout is going to be beautifully awful!
Can you cook?
Harry worriedly asked Remus.
I can cook anything that comes in a box with directions on the back.
The werewolf grinned at him sheepishly. Harry sighed, realizing what was going to happen.
Fine, I'm going to see what you have in the kitchen. I really hope someone bought groceries.
You can cook? Sirius asked Harry with a surprised expression.
I can if you have any food.
The teen was not looking forward to it. After being forced to cook for the Dursleys his entire life, cooking was one of his least favorite things to do. He had so many bad memories in the kitchen from being forced to cook meals he wouldn't be allowed to eat, dodging frying pans aimed at his head, and Dudley pushing him into the hot stove, and him being punished for crying out and dropping things. Even with all of that, he knew he was an excellent cook, though. Anyone would just need to look at the girth of his uncle and cousin to see that. Not seeing the internal struggle in his godson, Sirius followed along behind, skipping happily as the whole group went to the kitchen.
I told Creature you were coming a few days ago.
The anime just explained.
He stocked the whole kitchen, cleaned your room again. You now have 3 vases of dead flowers in there, and now he's gone into his invisibility mode and no one has seen him in about 24 hours.
Strange, Harry remarked simply as he looked in the cupboards. Luckily they were very well stocked.
I'm going to make a curry,
he finally decided. Initially, Harry had started Sirius and Remus out on chopping ingredients. After they started throwing carrots at each other, Harry moved them to stirring. It only took 10 minutes before they were distracted again, and Harry eventually just kicked them both out of the kitchen with Tonks following along behind, laughing at them the whole time. He needed another saucepan, and wasn't sure where he could find one, once he was finally left alone, grumbling as he cooked for the order members.
Creature, is there another saucepan?
Harry called out, feeling silly talking to a house elf that wasn't in the room. Another pan immediately appeared on the stove with a loud pop.
Thank you!
Harry called out again, wondering if he'd ever see the house elves.
I'm not going to hurt you, by the way. Seriously, I'm harmless.
The ancient house elf popped into the room and warily stared at the Dementor.
Creature thinks the Dementor might eat his soul.
The Dementor destroyed the evil in the locket, though, when Creature couldn't. So Master Regulus can rest in peace now. Creature doesn't know what to do, he continued in a tone of distress, wringing his bony hands. I'm not going to eat your soul, Creature, Harry assured him with a smile. I don't think house elf souls would taste very good anyway. Please keep it to yourself that I'm a Dementor, though, if you don't mind. As for Master Regulus— Do you mean this locket? He asked, pulling the locket up to show the elf. Creature nodded his head vigorously. The evil wizard's locket. Master Regulus asked Creature to destroy it, but Creature couldn't. Harry glanced around at the multiple pans simmering and the massive undertaking he was in the middle of with a sigh. Creature, would you like to help me by doing some chopping? I would love to hear more about Regulus and the locket as well. The house elf's face went from very to happy as he immediately started chopping, produced expertly and chatting about his beloved Master Regulus. Harry was so grateful to the house elf that he listened to whatever he wanted to share for as long as he wanted to share. This is the best curry I've ever had, Kingsley Shacklebolt exclaimed as he got a second helping while everyone sat around the table chatting before the order meeting. Yes, Sirius! Molly Weasley nodded in shocked respect. I have to admit, I didn't believe you could do it. You've proven me wrong. Oh, please! Harry kicked us all out of the kitchen after about 15 minutes. Tonks laughed and dropped her fork on the ground while Sirius glowered at her. You made this, Harry? You made this, Harry? Mr. and Mrs. Weasley gaped at the teen as everyone else looked at him in shock. Harry turned pink in embarrassment. Creature helped a lot. He motioned for the house elf who was washing dishes in the corner, to everyone's amazement since he usually never helped with anything. I didn't realize you could cook! Mrs. Weasley shot narrowed glares at her kids, those old enough for the order anyway, who were avoiding her eyes. None of them wanted to learn to cook, no matter how much she tried to get them to. Yes, very impressive, my boy. Dumbledore grinned at Harry, looking a little less worried than he had in a while. Harry figured that might be since he, the Dementor, was away from all the students at the school. No worries. It's all right, sure. Harry mumbled out, looking for an escape. The escape came when he was kicked out of the kitchen and the meeting started shortly after. He was fine with that, though. He had his own plans. Over the summer, Harry had noticed that Snape would normally stay after order meetings to get potions started that took all night to brew. He'd then return to the next morning to bottle them. It didn't sit right with Harry, the fact that Remus didn't seem to know about the HSMC, and he couldn't figure out why Snape would have sold him out third year either. He needed to talk to the potions master. He would just have to find a way to make the man answer his questions. A couple of hours later, Harry had unpacked his trunk in his room and admired the dead flowers Creature had left him. He'd also come up with a semblance of a plan while he waited outside the attic door for Snape to come up and start the potions. The tall man stopped and sneered at the teen when he arrived at the door to his makeshift lab. What do you want, Potter? I'm supposed to be rid of you for a couple weeks. I have some questions I need to ask, Harry said as he nervously opened the door for his professor. I am not in an answering mood. Bugger off, Snape growled at him and pushed past, seemingly more irritated than he normally was. Harry hurried through the door behind him. I have a deal for you. If you answer my questions, I promise I won't talk to you for the rest of the break. I'll avoid you as much as possible, and I'll be a ghost until the new year. The vampire narrowed his gaze and considered for a moment. You promise to completely avoid me, not even looking in my direction if you could help it? He asked, an eyebrow quirking in question. As much as humanly possible, or dementorly possible rather. Harry smiled hopefully. Snape gave a sharp nod and started pulling vials off his shelves. Fine, ask your questions, but I'm not answering anything I don't want to. Taking a stealing breath, Harry jumped right in. Why did you turn in Remus after my third year? Doesn't that go against the HSMC stands? What the HSMC stands for? Harry asked, wondering if Snape actually believed in the society and what it stood for, even as the sponsor. The vampire sneered from where he was starting to chop up ingredients. Lupin was not the first werewolf that has attended Hogwarts, nor will he be the last, he explained with venom. The only difference with Lupin is that the headmaster knew about him. How does that make any difference? Harry asked in confusion while he perched on a stool in the corner. Look, Potter, I hated your father. Snape looked at him with a glare. I hate your godfather, but I absolutely loathe Lupin. I outed him in your third year because he didn't take his potion. He put students in danger and refused to follow safety measures, a pattern from even his school days, might I add. It's standard society procedure. Those who refuse to take the safety of others seriously are asked to leave, no matter my personal feelings on the matter. If he were a student, he'd be expelled. As a professor, it was my only resource. Harry's eyes widened in shock. Remus seemed, harmless for a werewolf. He had no clue what the mild-mannered man could have done to cause the amount of ire Snape was sending his way. However, he also understood the direness of the situation the werewolf had caused, since he and his friends were almost killed that night, as much as he didn't want to admit it. Okay, why do you loathe him so much then? Snape sighed and went back to chopping. My mother was a member of the HSMC before me, so I joined as soon as I started Hogwarts, like Esseline did this year. Lupin was known by Madame Pomfrey already, and the headmaster, of course, who didn't know that werewolves have frequently attended the school. We even have special rooms set up in the dungeon for full moons, and the system worked out to ensure safety for the werewolves and the other students. The Shrieking Shack is much less secure or safe for transformations than the rooms set up from the founding of Hogwarts specifically for werewolves, he explained, while his hands expertly sliced roots on his cutting board. Vampires are frequently paired with werewolves when possible, as we are immune to their bites and tend to be much more equipped to handle them during their transformation if necessary. As a vampire, and in the same year as him, I was the one sent to invite Lupin to the society, much as Miss Lovegood did for you. I take it that didn't go well."
Harry raised an eyebrow. He hadn't known there was such an extensive system in place before.
"You could say that."
Snape snorted.
We waited a few weeks to approach him, and by the time I was able to talk to him, he'd already made friends with those idiotic marauders. He didn't want to acknowledge the wolf existed and resented me even bringing it up. He wanted to pretend he was normal and ignore that he had a very little problem once a month, as he put it. If I had to guess, he was probably afraid his new friends would reject him if he was seen talking to a Slytherin, let alone if they found out he was a werewolf.
So he was never a member of the HSMC. Harry sighed, realizing why Remus had no clue what he'd been talking about.
Not only that, but he told my only friend in 5th year that I was a vampire, outing me before I could tell her myself.
The man viciously chopped some slugs next, taking out his frustration on the ingredients.
Why would he do that?
Harry gasped. It was a betrayal he'd never even imagined coming from the man.
My friend and I were fighting at the time, and she never talked to me again, so I was unable to learn why. You'd have to ask him.
Snape said from between gritted teeth.
I can only imagine it was to get me out of my friend's life for good.
Harry was shocked beyond belief. Why would anyone do that to someone? It's not like Snape didn't have a handle on his vampiric abilities. Obviously he did it. If it was the 5th year, he wouldn't have been a danger to his friend.
So your friend didn't talk to you again because you're a vampire?
Snape shook his head sadly, answering, but almost not seeming to realize Harry was in the room anymore.
No. Or at least I doubt it. She wasn't one to hold prejudices as such, but it was the fact I hadn't told her, along with other things that were going on at the time as well. Are you done, Potter?
He growled at the end, as it clicked who it was he was opening up to. Snape's hand twitched like he really wanted to punch something or throw something.
Wait, that means when Sirius tried to convince you to go to the Shrieking Shack on a full moon, you already knew what was going on. You weren't in any danger.
Harry asked in surprise when the incident he'd learned about in his 3rd year came to mind. Snape gave a dark chuckle.
If anything, your father saved Lupin's life, not mine. I'm sorry, Professor.
The Dementor sighed sadly. He could see Snape was past the point of his patience, and it would be best to leave him alone. But Harry just couldn't help pushing forward. He had to know.
Why do you hate me, though? I get Remus, I get Sirius, I even kind of get my dad, but I didn't meet either Sirius or Remus until my 3rd year, and I don't even remember my dad.
Snape threw the knife he was holding at the wall, where it stuck vibrating just a feet from Harry. He looked up at Harry, a cruel sneer on his face.
Because you killed her!
He growled out in frustration, causing Harry to jump in surprise.
I what?
Harry exclaimed, jumping up and backing to the door. I haven't killed anyone!
My friend!
Snape glowered desperately.
Lily, she died because of you. I was never able to make up with her because she died.
Harry's stomach instantly seemed to fall from his body.
It was what he'd secretly believed his entire life, spoken from someone else's mouth. He'd killed her, his mother. He had no clue the professor had been friends with his mother, but those words spoken in the venom of hate hit Harry in the part of himself he tried to ignore, the part that was raised in a cupboard and told he was worthless his entire life. It didn't matter who said it. Harry already believed it. Thank you, Professor, he gasped out suddenly. Thank you for answering my questions. I won't talk to you again. The man retrieved his knife from the wall and glared at his student. I'll see you back at Hogwarts then. He coldly turned back to his brewing. Harry stumbled out of the attic down to his room in a daze. His mother and father were dead because of him. So was Cedric. So was whoever else Voldemort had killed because he's stupidly been led into a trap to resurrect the Dark Lord. There was little to no thought put into it when Jamie fell to the bed and Harry tucked him in. He didn't analyze why he told the soulless shell goodbye or why he put extra owl treats in Hedwig's empty cage. The only thing he knew was that he wasn't where he was supposed to be anymore. The Order was put together again because he'd messed up and Voldemort was back. They were fighting because of him. Sirius and Remus were in danger because of him. Graham and Malfoy didn't feel safe in their own homes, and Muggleborns like Hermione were being targeted. Snape had opened the floodgates and Harry felt it all wash over him. This was not where he was supposed to be, and he needed to leave. The Dementor stood, hovering just outside number 12 Grimmauld Place, having left in shadows without anyone seeing him. Where was he supposed to be? Where could he atone for all he'd done? The answer came as almost a call on his soul. He thought he would have needed a map or at least a general direction, but he knew instinctively exactly where he was going. The shadows embraced Harry as he flew swiftly off to where the Dementors belonged to Azkaban Prison. A couple things struck Harry as he approached the prison. He was resigned to staying at the rest of his life. First of all, it actually wasn't that bad. It felt almost homey. Second, the mentors didn't actually all look the same. Yes, they all wore the same tattered robes, and they didn't have genders per se, but their auras were completely different. Several Dementors started heading his way when he got close, one out front of the others. Harry steeled himself for whatever was about to happen. The one Dementor reached him first and blocked his path, crossing his skeletal arms and seeming to stare at the newcomer. "Well, it's about time. We've been waiting for you for months now." The Dementor huffed in irritation. Harry looked at him in confusion. It only took a minute before he was absolutely certain this was the Dementor who had originally sucked out his soul. "Hey, you just attacked me and left. What do you mean you've been waiting for me? You ruined my life and went on with your business." The Dementor flew rapidly up to invade his personal space, causing Harry to flinch back unconsciously. "I was instructed to eat your soul. You're lucky I only ate the parasite living on it. I could have taken both and left you for dead. Plus I left you your body. What do you mean I ruined your life? I turned you into a Dementor. What's wrong with being a Dementor? You should be thanking me, you ungrateful dunderhead.
Calm down! Untranslatable name of Screeches, another Dementor instructed the one in front of Harry. Since the name was completely not translatable to English, Harry immediately decided to call the Dementor Drake in his head, since he was obviously a kindred spirit of Draco Malfoy's.
What do you mean, parasite on my soul?
Harry asked the group of Dementors as a whole, who were now hovering in a ring around him.
Why did you turn me into one of you?
The new Dementor, who seemed to be in charge from his demeanor, pushed Drake back some. You had another soul parasitically living on yours. Our guess is that it must be a part of the Dark Lord's from when he tried to kill you as a baby. It tasted too good to not be from someone exceptionally evil. We tried to get it out of you when we were around the school 2 years ago, but you reacted badly every time we got near. The Dementor, who Harry decided to call King, since he reminded Harry a lot of Kingsley Shacklebolt, explained.
You were trying to help me?
Harry gaped at them. He had just assumed they really thought his soul tasted good for some reason. He was horrified that he might have had a piece of Voldemort's soul living in him this entire time. He desperately hoped they were wrong about that.
Idiot!
Draco grumbled before King shot him a glare. When we were sent by the Ministry to basically kill you, well, we took the opportunity to turn you into one of us. A different Dementor jumped to explain. This one, Harry decided had a similar aura to Hermione. He was thinking Jean for a name, since it was Hermione's middle name. With the danger you seem to be in, you'd be safer as a Dementor, and we were kind of hoping you'd help us with something too. It took him
5 months to find us.
Drake still grumbled.
I doubt he's intelligent enough to be of any help.
Drake, that's enough. You will be silent, or you can go guard that annoying Lestrange woman. A very McGonagall-like Dementor scolded him. Athena, Harry decided as a name. Don't listen to him, Harry. We know it has all been a huge adjustment for you. We just wouldn't have sent the insensitive Drake to be the one in charge of you if we thought any of the rest of us could do it. It is very difficult to pull out a soul and not consume it. Jean continued the explanation. The willpower is unimaginable. Drake looked very smug at that. Or the pighead, the stubbornness, however you want to look at it. Drake was now glaring, though how Harry knew with the hoods was beyond him. It was like his aura was glaring.
Okay.
Harry was very confused. The Dementors were trying to help him all along, and apparently the Ministry wanted him dead as well as Voldemort. What was going on?
I don't understand. You said you needed my help? The Ministry idiots stopped reading our mail.
A Dementor that had an aura similar to Ron's, that Harry immediately named Ronnie, huffed out.
What does that mean exactly?
Harry asked, not feeling any less confused. Oh dear! We really should start from the beginning, Athena said airily. Well, first of all, we have a contract with the British Ministry of Magic to guard Azkaban prison for them. However, this contract was up about a decade ago. We've been having communication issues, though, since our letters seem to be put in some sort of an eternal limbo. They cannot understand our spoken language.
Why don't you just get a house elf to interpret for you?
Harry asked, wondering if they really turned him
into a Dementor just to be an interpreter.
All the Dementors looked at each other in shocked confusion.
We didn't know they understood us.
Ronnie finally explained with a shrug.
They avoid us so much, I don't think we've ever actually been in the same room with one. It's not even like house elf souls would taste good. Can you imagine? It'd be like eating grass.
All the Dementors, Harry included, shuddered.
So your contract is up and you need it renegotiated,
Harry clarified.
And you want me to talk to the ministry?
Dad, or we want to move somewhere else, but we don't want to leave the prison unguarded. That would be irresponsible, King added. We don't understand. Is the ministry corrupt or just completely incompetent? We've been owling them for years and they never respond. Take that serious black bloke. We owled them as soon as he arrived that he was a dog animagus and needed a different cell we didn't have set up, and no one got back to us. Then we owled them that he was obviously not imprisoned for the crimes he was accused of, since his soul didn't taste good. The eviler and more corrupt the soul, the better it tastes. A soul that tastes that bland has no reason to be in maximum security.
We get
offers from other wizard prisons all the time, and we would like to consider accepting one, Athena said. Also, the Dark Lord has been asking us to join his side. We aren't sure that's the right move for us, though. You seem to be in the middle of everything, and we figured you would know what was going on. Is the Ministry of evil, or is the Dark Lord? At that, Harry just shrugged.
I don't know, maybe both,
was the most honest answer he could
give. I think the ministry is more incompetent than evil, though maybe Umbridge is definitely evil. Voldemort is the worst of the worst, though. Drake should know if he ate part of his soul.
Best soul I've ever eaten, the Dementor answered wistfully, seeming to be caught up in memory.
It was sweet and spicy and just delicious.
Harry's mind was whirling as the soul from the locket and the diadem could have been described the same. Was it possible they were pieces of Voldemort's soul as well?
Well, you see, evil. Do you want to have a contract with an evil person?
The Dementors all looked at each other questioningly. The souls he'd give us would probably taste horrible, Ronnie remarked with a shrug. That's assuming he'd be going after good people. Very true, King nodded in agreement. Maybe we should consider one of the other prison offers. There was that one on an island in the Caribbean. It would be nice and warm there.
Harry nodded, knowing the draw of Dad. Even now that he'd been releasing his aura, it would still be nice to be in a warmer climate. It was hard to stay warm in this body. So are we going to the Caribbean then? He asked happily.
What, we?
Drake drawled questioningly. Don't you have your own life? If you take care of your own body, it should last you most of your life unless someone kills it. Dementor lifespans aren't much longer than wizards.
Don't be a prat, Drake, Jean admonished. If Harry wants to join us, he can. Harry dear, you aren't bound by our contract because we always add in a loophole where only spawned Dementors are included. You were made, not spawned, but created. It gives us wiggle room in case we need someone who is freer to move around. Like in this situation, it helps that no one outside of our species knows we can do this. We certainly could use your help in handling all this mess with the humans, though, if you're willing, King asked hopefully. If we didn't think it'd lead to a mass breakout, we would have left back when our contract ended. It's not good business to be seen as unreliable guards, though. We would be happy to have you if you don't want to throw your lot in with us. If you want to throw your lot in with us, we thought you'd want to stay with your friends and family, though, Athena added kindly. That's why we were very clear with Drake that he had to leave you your body. We meant to keep you safe, not force you to follow our ways. Harry was taken aback and reevaluating everything he knew to be true in the world. These Dementors were looking out for him. They made him indestructible and left him the ability to remain with his friends. They healed a part of his soul he didn't even know was damaged. He had wondered why he felt so much better and lighter after he was attacked. He just didn't know he'd been living with a parasite all this time. The monsters that he had feared more than anything else in the world were just another species, one that was caught in between bureaucracy and evil in a war they didn't understand, and where they had limited means of communication with others. Maybe this was where he belonged. Maybe this was where he could atone for being a curse to those he loved. I think I'd like to stay for a while and learn more about you all. He finished finally and slowly. I think maybe this is where I should be. My friends really don't need me back there. I would only end up hurting them anyway. Jean put a skeletal arm around Harry, just as Hermione would do, which would have caused him to tear up if he had still eyes. I doubt that, Harry, but we are happy to keep you as long as you want, the Dementor said as the group made their way back towards the prison. Hey, are you hungry? We're going to make a pass through maximum security soon. You want to join? I could eat. Harry smiled, pulling a tube of lip balm out of his pocket and applying it as the Dementors marveled around him. Have you more of that? Athena asked in interest. Sure, I have a lot. Harry passed over a tube as the Dementors excitedly passed it around, applying it. Harry grimaced, really hoping there weren't any Dementor germs, but decided not to mention it. Chapter 12. How to Write a Business Lecture. Harry had been with the other Dementors at Azkaban for about 5 days, and the morning of Christmas Eve was dawning. It had been a highly productive 5 days overall. From what Harry could tell, the Dementors were excellent at running a prison, but terrible at contract negotiations. The consensus seemed to be that it would be the best to either stick it out with the Ministry or take Voldemort up on his offer, just so they wouldn't have to move. When Harry explained very patiently that neither of those options were in their best interests, the common vote was to just pick an offer off the top of the pile and accept that one. The pile turned out to be a literal pile. Apparently the creatures were highly in demand across the world to run magical prisons. Every offer they had received over the years had been tossed into an empty cell in the minimum security wing, and the pile was overtaking almost half the cell. Harry, Jean, and Athena ended up sorting through the entire pile and narrowing it down to just one neat stack of acceptable offers. Any repeat letters were tossed, those for prison in very cold climates, those that didn't have a maximum security wing, and ones where the air was too dry to create mist. Once the letter for the prisons located in its own Caribbean island was explained to the group, all around 150 or so Dementors voted unanimously to accept the offer. Harry then found himself learning how to write rejection, resignation, and acceptance letters. He figured he was gaining some very practical business experience at least. He tore up 5 letters before he had an acceptable one to send to Voldemort, respectfully rejecting his offer. Since it was coming from the Dementors as a whole and not Harry Potter, he figured he needed to represent them as they would want to be represented. And they were a very neutral party in the war. Really, if it didn't impact their ability to hang out around evil people and feed from their souls, they didn't really care what was going on. Considering neither side of the war cared for them, really both sides hated them, Harry could understand where they were coming from. The ministry was also sent a letter of resignation, though no one believed they would actually read it. The Dementors didn't want to leave their post without someone realizing they were gone, so Harry came up with the idea of sending a letter to the newspaper. He hadn't quite figured out how to ensure they printed it, so it was currently sitting on his makeshift desk in the cell he had been given for his own personal use. One of the Dementors, Ronnie, if he had to guess, had even put a piece of what looked like an aluminium foil up by the tiny barred window to catch the sunlight and cast shiny stars through the cell. To a Dementor, the prison already felt pretty homey, but the other Dementors seemed to be really trying to make Harry feel welcome and like he was a valued member of the group, especially as he had helped them so much already. The acceptance letter was much easier to write, but then he had to deal with the back and forth of negotiations after the initial letter of acceptance was sent by Owl. The ministry located in the Turks and Caicos sent a self-updating parchment where they could communicate instantly with each other by just by writing on the paper. They used this to muck up a draft contract that Harry insisted needed to be looked over by a solicitor before it was finalized. The Dementor and the Caribbean Ministry ended up agreeing to just 20 years in the initial contract, with the opportunity to extend for another 50 years at that point if both parties found the arrangement acceptable. It was much better than the Dementor's original contract with the British Ministry for 100 years without acceptable communications of term. They also made it very clear that a house elf would be required to be at every in-person negotiation for translating purposes. Harry couldn't believe they had gotten through all of that in only 5 days, but it did help that none of the Dementors had to sleep. It was the most useful he had felt in a very long time, maybe ever. He felt bad for leaving Jamie and hoped someone was taking care of him, but he actually felt needed at the prison and not like he was in the way or one wrong move from getting the rest of his friends and family killed through a mistake he made. The Dementor's excitement over the move was infectious as well. Harry happily sat through a lecture led by Athena and King on what to expect on an island with more sun and warmer weather, since they seemed to be the best traveled of the group. Everyone oohed and ahed when Athena explained how the sun would glint off the water and shine like diamonds. Harry was glad to know he wasn't the only Dementor fascinated by shiny things. Christmas Eve was positively festive at the prison,
Well, not for the prisoners. Harry was positive the prisoners had no clue what day it even was. But the Dementors knew how to party on their end. Apparently, Dementors can sing. Harry wasn't sure how it would sound to someone with human ears. Probably horrifying. But to him, they were actually quite good. Especially Drake. But no one would tell him that because his ego was already too inflamed. There was also dancing, races across the island, and games that could be played in flight. All the activity ground to a halt, and a hush settled over the group as a blonde fairy landed right in the midst of the activity. The fairy's wings were iridescent and caught the light, shining like they were covered in crystals and casting little rainbows on the stone walls. The entire group of Dementors were mesmerized as one pulled in their auras to protect the beautiful creatures in their midst.
Hello?
Luna awkwardly waved at the stunned group of Dementors.
Is Harry Potter around here somewhere? I'm sorry, I'm not good at telling you all apart.
All the Dementors continued to stare in shocked awe as her wings fluttered a bit and the light shined once more.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Luna chuckled and quickly cast her normal glamour back on her wings.
I forgot the shiny object thing. Now, Harry Potter, are you in here somewhere?
Harry floated through the group until he was hovering beside a stern-looking Athena, who blocked his progress protectively. "She's a friend," Harry explained to the other Dementor. "She won't hurt me."
You forget, young one, that we can feel emotions.
Athena took Harry's wrist in her hand.
You came here broken inside, and we will not let you leave if it's only to be broken once more.
Harry patted her hand and smiled. I don't plan to leave, Athena. I just want to talk to her. Is that okay? Harry could feel Athena's aura waver in indecision, but she did eventually move aside to let go of Harry's wrist. He continued until he was right in front of his friend and gave her a little wave, knowing she wouldn't be able to understand him.
Thank Merlin! I was worried. I was wrong about where you ran off to.
Luna gave the Dementor a hug, shocking the rest of the group.
Your godfather, Professor Lupin, and the headmaster have been looking everywhere for you, but I knew this was where you would go. Where else would a Dementor go to feel safe? Oh, Harry, what happened?
Harry shrugged but didn't know how to convey everything non-verbally. Frankly, he didn't feel up to conveying it verbally either.
I guess I should explain why I'm here.
Luna bounced happily and pulled Harry over to the boulder she sat down on, and the other Dementors slowly dispersed, finally believing Harry would be relatively safe.
Hedwig came to me yesterday, distraught. Harry, you have a lot of apologizing to do there, and I'm just saying. Anyway, she seemed to want me to follow her, and so I flew along behind her to somewhere in London. I ended up having to sit on a street corner and stare at the magic for the longest until I could work out I was looking at a townhouse. Then I just walked up and knocked.
You saw through a Fidelius charm? Harry exclaimed, forgetting Luna couldn't understand him.
Oh, sorry, right. Luna looked at him sheepishly. Creature!
After a loud pop, the ancient house elf stared around himself in fear, but took a deep, steadying breath and turned to Luna.
Mistress Fairy, did you find Creature's friend? Yes, Creature. Luna smiled at the elf kindly before motioning to Harry. Here's Harry. Do you mind translating for him, please?
Creature nodded with a little awkward wave to Harry.
Yes, Mistress Fairy.
He responded promptly.
Harry Dementor, you shouldn't have run off. You should have told Creature at least.
He turned to admonish Harry next.
I'm sorry, Creature.
Harry shook his head, confused that the house elf actually cared. The elf narrowed his eyes, but just crossed his arms and gave Harry a little nod.
Creature, would you ask Luna how she got into the house?
Luna just rolled her eyes after Creature's translation. Really, Harry, I'm a fairy, she said in answer before continuing. Anyway, the headmaster opens the door and your godfather, who looks remarkably like the singer's stubby bro, Bartman, by the way, was just distraught. Apparently Mr. Black and Professor Lupin tried to wake you up in the morning after you left, and Jamie, of course, wouldn't wake up. Professor Lupin cast some kind of diagnostic charm, and they freaked out when they realized Jamie doesn't have a soul. They went and got Headmaster Dumbledore, and he had to explain everything to them. I don't think that helped them freak out any less, though.
Oh no, so they know now.
Harry asked dejectedly.
I guess I really won't be returning. I hadn't planned to, but it was nice to know it was an option.
What are you talking about, Harry? Of course you're coming back with me, Luna exclaimed in shock. I'm sure the other Dementors are just lovely, but your friends need you. All those men I met at Grimmauld Place were useless, even the headmaster. You left and they just lost all ability to cope. If I hadn't have shown up, they'd be looking for you in youth hostels in London. That was the actual plan of where they were going to start looking. You left your body and they still thought you'd be around people. Harry shook his head determinedly. He knew Sirius mentally couldn't accept him as he was, and if Remus couldn't accept himself, why would he be able to accept Harry? No, it was best if he just stayed away.
No, Luna, I'll miss you all terribly, but you don't need me. I put you all at risk. You're much better off without me screwing things up for you.
I really hope Creature translated what you just said wrong, Luna exclaimed indignantly as Creature shot her a death glare, clearly communicating he'd translated every word correctly. What did Severus say to you that sent you off like this? You should know he feels terribly about it. He's been taking care of Jamie since you left and positively is beside himself. Not that he'd ever admit that, of course. He told me that he said something he shouldn't have, something that wasn't true at all. Harry shook his head sadly, but very surprised she'd talk to the professor about him.
No, Luna. He only told me the truth. He's the only one who sees me as I am. Since I started Hogwarts, he's the only one. He's the only one who sees, that saw me, that saw how much of a disappointment I am. He's the one. He's the only one that sees the freak and not the boy who lived. Or the son of James and Lily Potter or whatever. No, you don't know who I really am, Luna. I should stay here. The Dementors actually need me. I can't mess up and get everyone killed here.
Creature translated every single word like a curse as he opened and closed his little hands, like he was imagining strangling Snape over and over again.
Creature will destroy the potions, master.
He ended his translation with the vehement declaration.
No, Creature. No, Creature. He's right, and only told me what I needed to hear.
Harry assured him frantically.
What in the goddess's name did the human say?
Drake exclaimed as he hovered down from where he'd been spying on them from above.
I know you're an idiot, Potter, but even you should know. What in the goddess's name did the human say? Drake exclaimed as he hovered down from where he had been spying on them from above. I know you're an idiot, Potter, but even you should know he was speaking out of his arse if he said anything like what you just did.
Creature likes his new Dementor.
The house elf grinned evilly.
The Dementor will help Creature destroy the man.
Sure, what the hell? Drake shrugged with a nod to the elf. First of all, he's a vampire, not a human. Second, there's no reason to destroy him, whatever that means. Harry sighed and rubbed the back of his neck under his hood.
I'm not sure what's going on exactly. Luna looked between the three since Creature hadn't translated the back and forth. But Severus definitely didn't mean whatever it was he said. He said that he'd had a really bad day and took it out on you. I would have made him come with me, but I wasn't sure if he'd just make it worse. Look, you need to come back and talk to him, and to Mr. Black and Professor Lupin. Mr. Black wanted to come with us, but he just couldn't. He still loves you, but you know, he tried but couldn't make it here. Professor Lupin and the headmaster are waiting for us at the gates, though. They can't fly, so I had to come on ahead. Just come talk to them, okay?
No, it's best that we make a clean break, Harry protested vehemently. They can get on with their lives now and not have to worry about me. Drake sighed loudly. Look, Elf, tell the fairy that she's going to need to bring the shit vampire or this isn't going to get anywhere. Tell her I'll sick Athena on him if he refuses to come. Drake, really? Harry huffed angrily.
Creature will get the shit vampire for new friend Dementor,
the elf exclaimed before immediately popping away. Do I even want to know what just happened? Luna asked in concern at where Creature had stood a second before. Both Dementors shook their heads at her. Yeah, I figured. Now, what all goes on at a Dementor Christmas? She asked as she looked around at all the activities happening in the prison yard. Severus Snape fell into a heap at the feet of the ancient house elf, who popped in a few minutes later. He stood elegantly and brushed the dust from his robes like he had meant to be kidnapped and crashed into a prison yard.
Which one of you is Potter?
He looked around at all the assembled Dementors, many of which had moved closer and released more of their aura as they had been listening in angrily to what had happened. Apparently, Dementors were fairly nosy by nature, and this was the most excitement they'd had since they were stationed around Hogwarts. Athena in particular looked like she was contemplating eating a soul for lunch. Harry raised a hand and gave him a little wave.
I'm sorry, Professor. I know I'm breaking my promise not to see you. I didn't send Creature. Merlin, Potter. I'm an acerbic, vicious man who had a very, very bad day,
Snape exclaimed after Creature's growled translation. He began pacing and ranting at the same time.
The Dark Lord was angry at me because I can't fix Pettigrew's potions mistake and make him look human again. So he made me torture some muggles with the Cruciatus curse on pain of death before being cursed myself. Then the Order accused me of liking to torture muggles and called me a monster in that meeting. I was in no mental state to talk to you then and should have just told you that. If anyone is to blame for your parents' death, it's me. I'm the idiot who thought divination was a ridiculous subject and assumed the Dark Lord wouldn't think the same thing. I'm an idiot that thought him partial prophecy I overheard that sent him after you.
Harry gasped at the man who stopped his rant with a regretful look towards the Dementor.
Harry,
Snape began again, facing the teen this time, a wave of distress, self-hatred and regret flowing steadily from the vampire.
I loved your mother. She was my best friend. You had absolutely nothing to do with her death. That blame lies completely at my feet. Yes, she gave her life for you, but that was who she was. She was a person who would willingly die for those she loved, and she couldn't ask her, and you couldn't ask her to be anyone different than who she was. I had no right to say anything else. Wow, I really do want to kill him.
Drake shook his head grimly from behind Harry.
Creature will help,
The house elf agreed gleefully. Harry put a steadying hand on Drake's arm to hold him back. Everything shifted in his mind. He heard Snape, but he heard more than his words. The meaning shifted his thought process as a new idea clicked, one he'd never considered before. His world then realigned along with a different axis. Snape was right. Lily Potter was a person who made decisions that she could live with, that fit in her moral code. She made decisions like Harry did with the information she had. Some of her decisions might not have always had the best outcome either. Snape had made decisions as well, some not the best or even good in the slightest, but those decisions were based on his knowledge and experiences too.
What if it's not either of our faults, Professor?
Harry asked in amazement at his new revelation.
No, Harry, it's definitely my fault.
Snape sighed tiredly after Creature's begrudging translation.
I don't know why you believe me for a moment before, but believe me now. I'm the reason your parents were murdered. No, listen. Mom died because of who she was. She saved me because that's a decision she would make. You told a prophecy, one you said was partial, and everyone knows your feeling about divination. You obviously don't respect it even now. Why would you think it was going to be taken so seriously by someone you assumed had similar thoughts to you at the time? Obviously, you know Voldemort's evil now, or you wouldn't have switched sides. Another decision you made when you had more information to go on.
Harry started pacing, seeing an approving look from Luna as Creature translated.
It's just like with the Triwizard Tournament. I made the decision to ask Cedric to take the cup with me. If it hadn't have been a portkey, Hogwarts would have had a united victory. Cedric would have a good job now and be famous, and I wouldn't have been hated by Hufflepuff for stealing a victory. I made a decision based on the information I had and who I am. Maybe his death wasn't my fault, but Voldemort's. Baby, my parents' death weren't your fault, but Voldemort's. He's the only one that made the decision to kill people based on the information he had. You just told a funny story you didn't believe, and I just tried to be nice to a friend. Neither of us decided to kill someone intentionally. Why in Merlin's name would you think the Diggory boy's death would be your fault?
Snape exclaimed, throwing his hands in the air in frustration.
That's ludicrous! Just as ludicrous as having any fault whatsoever in your parents' death. Did you cause the Black Plague centuries ago as well? That seems just as plausible.
Severus, I think he's getting there. Luna soothed. The man was starting to get flustered again.
I'm beginning to truly believe those relatives you grew up with messed you up with some very serious ways.
The man grumbled.
Well, this has gotten boring. I'm out. If we aren't going to snack on his soul.
Drake shrugged apologetically to Creature before flying off again.
Stop being an idiot, Potter,
he called out in farewell. So, you coming back with us? Luna asked hopefully.
Sirius and Remus want me back?
Harry asked, with only a slight glimmer of hope.
They've both been insufferably mooning over you since you left. I'm sure I'd be 6 feet underground right now if they knew you left because of some inane thing I said.
Snape answered with a sneer.
Of course they want you back, you dunderhead. And frankly, I'm tired of having to waste all my nutrition potion on keeping your sorry body alive.
Harry grinned at them both before turning back to the Dementors, pretending badly not to listen.
Guys, you think you can handle the move without me?
He asked. Of course, Harry. You've already done more than enough for us. Than we thought possible, King assured him as he hovered down to them and patted Harry on his shoulder. You'll need this. Jean handed Harry the letter of the newspaper from his desk. We'll make sure to set you up with a desk in the new prison. You'll come visit, right?
Of course,
Harry assured them as he took the letter.
I have to make sure those Caribbean wizards aren't taking advantage of you. Plus, I'd love to see the ocean sparkle like what Athena described. Sorry we turned you into a Dementor,
Ronnie added sheepishly from the back of the group.
And what's wrong with being a Dementor?
Harry laughed, echoing Drake from just days before.
Thank you all for finding a loophole in the ministry, telling you to suck out my soul, and for removing my parasite as well. It was our pleasure. No, really, it tasted amazing,
Drake exclaimed with a laugh. We'll miss you, Harry. Visit soon. Athena gave him a quick hug as many of the other Dementors waved goodbye.
Happy Christmas,
he called to them. Creature grumbled in irritation when Luna told him to take Severus back to Grimmauld Place, and they popped away from the prison. Come on, dear. Let's get you back to all the festivities. Mr. Black said he's missing his decorating and sneaking out, buddy. Luna took Harry's hand and removed the glamour from her wings. My eyes are up here, she choked as she waved a hand in front of Harry's face when he began to stare at her wings again.
Right. Your wings are very pretty.
Harry mumbled, even though she couldn't understand him, and tried to focus on anything else that wasn't shiny. Try not to fly into a tree, she laughed and took off into the air while Harry followed along behind her. As they approached the gates to the prison, Harry was surprised to see Dumbledore and Remus both pacing worriedly. It confused him to no end why they were concerned. He thought they would have been happy to get rid of him, especially once they learned he was now a Dementor. Found him! Luna exclaimed happily as they both landed past the gates.
Miss Lovegood, don't scare us like that again,
Dumbledore exclaimed.
We told you to wait and we'd find another way in. You weren't to go off on your own.
Harry nodded in understanding at that. They had been worried about Luna, not him. That made much more sense.
Oh, Harry!
Remus exclaimed and rushed forward, only to stop feet from him. We thought we'd lost you. Why did you just run off like that? And why didn't you tell us what happened? Harry cocked his head in confusion again.
Because you wouldn't want me around if I told you. See, you can't even get close to me without... though my aura is completely retracted. It's not like you can understand what I'm saying right now anyway, so this is completely pointless.
He huffed. If we head back to the house, Creature can translate for him, or he can go back into Jamie and talk for himself, Luna suggested as she reached over and took Harry's hand in hers. I don't know what you're saying, dear, but I don't think I like your tone.
I don't know how you can tell from the screeches.
Harry shrugged.
I would be nice to be able to be understood, though.
Dumbledore smiled kindly at him, clearly at a loss for understanding.
Right, so Remus, you apparate with Miss Lovegood, and I'll take Harry here. We'll meet back up at Grimmauld.
That tracked, Harry figured. Remus wouldn't want to be that close to him anymore. No! Luna spoke up, looking at Harry out of the corner of her eye. I'm going with the headmaster, Professor Lupin. You have Harry. He thinks you don't want him around anymore. Remus finally closed the distance between them cautiously.
Merlin, I know it's you in there, Harry, but it's hard to get past the seeing a Dementor. I'm so sorry. Sirius and I both want you with us, though please don't think otherwise, he said. Remus slowly wrapped an arm around Harry's waist tentatively in a loose hug. Harry stood as still as possible, not even breathing, so as to not startle the man. Right, let's go,
Dumbledore exclaimed with a twinkle in his eyes as Luna took a hold of his sleeve and they disappeared with a crack. Remus turned on the spot and they followed immediately after. The four appeared on the street in front of Sirius' house.
It still amazes me, Miss Lovegood, that fairies are able to see through a Fidelius charm. And that you're a fairy?
Dumbledore chuckled as he looked wistfully at the townhome.
I guess the protections we have aren't as secure as we believe them to be.
Luna smiled at him brightly. Why would a fairy care to tell your enemies where your hideout is located? Usually we keep to our own realm and don't even interact with either the wizarding or the muggle worlds. I'm only at Hogwarts because my mom fell in love with and married a wizard. Xenophilius is my stepdad, though really since I've lived with him since I was a baby and my mom passed, he's the only parent I know. I wanted to go to the school he went to. Plus the other fairies are all so stuffy and uptight, unlike Daddy.
I had no idea.
Dumbledore looked like he had been gifted a coatload of lemon drops. He was so interested in Luna.
You must tell me all about the fairy realm, if you are allowed. I know nothing of the culture.
Headmaster, we should probably go in. Remus interrupted. We left Sirius having a bit of a breakdown. Harry was having a bit of a breakdown himself at what he'd find on the other side of the door. How could Sirius ever accept him as the thing that had tormented him for over a decade? They entered the house and were immediately greeted with the sound of breaking china. Sirius was standing in the entryway, looking a fright with his hair rumpled and his clothes looking like he hadn't changed for days. The teacup he had been holding was shattered at his feet, and he kept one eye on Harry as he addressed Dumbledore.
That one's that that one's definitely Harry, right? He asked shakily. Yes, Sirius, this Dementor is definitely Harry,
the elderly man assured him with a grin and a bounce in his step.
Oh, thank Merlin!
Sirius rushed forward to everyone's surprise and grabbed the Dementor in a bear hug.
I thought I'd lost you, pup. Never do that to me again. I don't care what you are as long as you're here. And don't you leave me again like that ever.
Harry awkwardly patted the man on his back, making sure his aura was as tightly pulled in as possible. He hesitated a moment once Sirius pulled away, but he hovered slowly up the stairs after a quick pat on his godfather's arm. He had to find his body. He couldn't take no one understanding him a moment longer. Jamie was just where Harry had left him, tucked into bed. Snape was in the room, though as well, sitting beside the nightstand that was littered with potion vials.
Finally, the errant Dementor has returned,
the vampire drawled. I return responsibility of him back over to you. He motioned with a hand to Jamie as he stood to leave the room.
Never make me babysit again.
Harry chuckled but fell back into his body, picking up the shell once more.
Thank you, Professor,
he said as Snape paused at the door.
Look, Potter.
Snape sighed, seeming to come to a difficult decision.
The prophecy, the one I mentioned, that's what the Order was protecting at the Ministry. The Dark Lord wants to hear the rest of it. I only know the first part, but if you want, I'll tell it to you.
Harry pulled his feet up and sat cross-legged on the bed, thinking about the offer as he watched the light play off the stones on his bracelet.
No, sir, I don't think I want to know,
he said to Snape's complete surprise.
Look, like Voldemort, and despite my experiences with the subject so far, I actually believe in divination. Unlike Voldemort, I don't want to know what destiny has in store for me until I'm forced to meet it head on. I may have only been with the Dementors for 5 days, but during that time, and my time with the HSMC, I've come to some pretty difficult conclusions. And what might those be, Mr. Potter?
Snape asked as he crossed his arms and leaned against the door frame in surprised interest.
First, Voldemort has absolutely no interest in helping magical creatures, no matter what he might say.
Harry began.
That is a given.
Snape snarled in agreement.
Second, Harry paused with a sigh. The Dementors told me the Ministry sent them to kill me this past summer, so the wizarding world doesn't have my best interests at heart, as well as clearly demonstrating they hate magical creatures through their policies and racism over the years.
The vampire raised a surprised eyebrows at the news.
So,
your plan is to be neutral in the war? Harry shook his head.
No, that ship has sailed back before I was even born.
Indeed. Snape nodded in agreement.
If I'm a third side now, then so be it. The teen sighed in resignation. I decided that my only responsibility is to look out for the Dementors and the house elves, and the fairies, and the gargoyles, and druids, and whatever the hell Malfoy is. If I have to fight for someone, they're the only ones that deserve it. They are the only ones that accepted me as their people and not some kind of figurehead or savior. And honestly, they're the only ones that actually asked for my help instead of just expecting it. I don't know what that means, but it's the only thing that makes sense to me anymore.
Snape slowly nodded in understanding.
Potter, your mother, Lily, she would be proud of you,
he said quietly, as if it took his entire being to force the words out. Harry could feel the truth in the words this time, though. The wave of emotion that hit him caused him to gasp and hold back tears. The vampire turned to leave once more.
Professor?
Harry stopped him again, a small smile on his face.
I might not especially like you a lot, and you are definitely a bit of a bully, but you're not a monster, and thank you. Thank you for trying to make better decisions, even though they bring you pain. I think Mom would be proud of that too. At least I hope she would.
Snape looked over his shoulder for a minute before giving a slight nod and silently disappearing from the room and back into the attic. Harry grabbed his glasses off the nightstand and took a deep breath before steeling himself to head back downstairs and face the music.
Harry, welcome back,
Dumbledore said with a smile, but also sternly.
You can't run off like that. What were you thinking?
Harry shrugged as he slowly made his way into the sitting room where Kreacher had served everyone tea.
I was thinking you'd all be better off without me. Sirius and Remus wouldn't want a Dementor hanging around the house, and you, Headmaster, wouldn't need to worry about the other students around me all the time.
Luna stood from her armchair and sat down beside Harry on the couch, putting an arm around him.
Harry, Dumbledore sighed, showing his age in tiredness. I haven't been worried about the other students. I've been worried about you. Surely you know that. Your life was completely turned upside down, and you were handling it too well, or so I thought. I was worried about you, not that you would harm anyone. I know you'd never do that.
See? Luna smiled at him. There is no monster.
Miss Lovegood, Albus, maybe you should both give us some time with Harry. I'm sure you have your own Christmas Eve events to get to anyway, Remus remarked as Sirius was wringing his hands in distress.
Daddy's probably missing me, Luna agreed as she stood. Don't make Hedwig or Kreacher have to track me down again, she warned Harry sternly but with a smile. Harry winced. He hadn't seen Hedwig yet and figured that was definitely not going to go well.
I won't, Luna,
he assured her, and then pulled out the letter of resignation from the Dementors.
Oh, would you have your dad print this in the Quibbler and maybe send it along to the Daily Prophet as well? It's from the Dementors.
The older men in the room all looked at the letter with interest but refrained from asking about it since Luna didn't ask. Sure, Harry. Daddy will love to do it. He was looking for something good for the front page.
Thank you for coming after me.
Harry smiled at his friend broadly. Always, she smiled back and squeezed his hand. Drop me off at home, Headmaster? She asked Dumbledore, made to follow her out.
Of course, my dear. So, do fairies celebrate Christmas, or do they have their own holidays? He asked as they headed out of the door and out of the house. Sirius moved over to take Luna's spot on the couch, looking nervous but hopeful at the same time. I can't believe you ran off to Azkaban, he grinned. Everyone wants to run away from there, but not to there. Harry grinned back at him. It's actually quite lovely. To a Dementor, it's calming and peaceful, like the basement here. Sirius stared at him in disbelief, while Remus chuckled. Harry, why didn't you think we'd accept you? The werewolf asked. You know what I am. Granted, a Dementor isn't as common, but why would we turn you away? Harry shook his head in bemusement. Why would you accept me if you can't accept yourself? I don't understand. Sirius and Remus both looked confused at that. Harry, Cub, why would you think I don't accept myself? You didn't know about remedial potions. Harry sighed and grimaced at having to explain without giving away what Snape had told him. The secret society? It's the Hogwarts Society of Magical Creatures. You were invited in your first year but turned down membership because you didn't want to be a werewolf. Or so I was told. What's he talking about, Remy? Sirius asked his friend in confusion. Remus, for his part, had a stricken look on his face. His mouth moved into a sad "Oh." Siri, Remus wasn't the first werewolf at Hogwarts, nor the last. Harry explained to his guardian. There is a whole society of magical creatures at the school, but he didn't want to be part of it. Why would he want me around if I'm a magical creature? I just don't understand. There were other werewolves? Why did you tell us, Remy? The animagus stared at his friend. You have to realize, Remus began. I didn't have any friends before Hogwarts, and it was first year. You guys accepted me, but as Remus, not Moony, not yet anyway. It was because of us? Sirius' eyes grew wide in horror. I didn't know it was quite as extensive of a group as what Harry said. When someone approached me to join, I only knew that I would be walking into a group that would immediately know I was a werewolf and who would define me as such my whole time at school. I was scared. Remus shook his head sadly. I lived in constant fear of people finding out what I was. I couldn't take that I'd be outed to a group, even a group of creatures themselves. Harry nodded, connecting something back to his epiphany from earlier. Making decisions based on fear hurts us in the long run, he explained. Remus smiled at him in agreement. Yes, I made many very bad decisions based on fear. I even outed another magical creature once to cover myself when a friend was close to finding out what I was. I still regret it to this day. Knowing what Remus was talking about, Harry sighed sadly. One decision made out of fear helped kill a friendship. Especially his mom eventually did find out and accept Remus in the future. What about now, Moony? Harry asked. Who are you? Are you a wizard, a werewolf, or what? Who would you want to be? Remus looked at his friend and seemed to consider his answer carefully. I'm a wizard who needs to learn how to be a werewolf properly, and who wants to be your dog father, if you'll have me, he asked hopefully. I'm a fugitive animagus with a fear of Dementors. Sirius grinned at them both. I'm also not quite sane. I'm here, though, For you, forever, if you'll have me too.
Harry put an arm around Sirius and smiled at them both, happily.
I think we should learn to be here for each other, especially since you're stuck with me this coming summer as well. I kind of burned a bridge with the Dursleys.
Sirius gave a loud whoop of glee, and Remus laughed.
So, cub, about dinner.
Remus started sheepishly.
Creature!
Harry called out loudly before he could be volunteered. Hello again, my darlings and lovies. Let's just say all the noises you hear in the background in the last few videos were a very certain naughty kitty. I might not have pictures of her in there, but if you'll go to Elizabeth's Discord server, I do quite often cause chaos there or post about the kitten. One of the 3 kittens at least, mostly, because she's always here, the others are always outside. Or the dogs, but mostly the cats. Anyway, I really hope you liked this few chapters. We're nearly in halfway points already. It's a short fic with long chapters. And let's hope you'll have a very good time. Take care of yourself, stay safe, kick the haters in the balls. And if you like my content, why don't you like and subscribe to know when I post again? Bye-bye!